Well, we're going to be joined now by two other preeminent educators in America. Jack DeGioia is the president of Georgetown University, one of the great institutions in the world, in the heart of Washington, D.C., a Jesuit institution of long standing. Jack. And Dr. Eduardo Padrón, who I think has the largest student body maybe in the history of higher education. How many students do you have now?
About 165,000 students.
This is a community college in Dade County. So let's begin with you, Dr. Padrón, about the students who come through your doors in Miami. We know that it's a cosmopolitan student body because of where you live. But what is their passion? What are they looking for when they come to your community college? What is it they want?
They're looking for a passport to the middle class because most of my students come from low-income backgrounds. It's a very diverse student body. We enroll the largest number of both Hispanics and African Americans than any other college in the United States. It's very international, students from 192 different countries. 94 different languages represented in the student body. Most of them, as I said, have to work in order to go to school. Most of them do not have families that are able to support them. And as I said, 68% are low income by federal standards. 48% live below the poverty line. But I wouldn't want any other student body. These are students who are there out of the conviction that the only way that they can achieve the American dream is by getting a post-secondary credential, whether it's an associate degree or a bachelor's degree, and they take that very seriously. And I'm very proud of my students, and especially of my faculty, who really understand the needs of the students. They need high-touch, high-tech approach to them, and I feel that the students it's incredible the level of achievement that the students are able to accomplish with the support that they need in order to be able to achieve their goals and their dreams.
You know, there was a time in America, certainly in my generation, where you got a college education, and then so many of my friends did this. They went to work for large corporations, stood in line, and then just stayed there. I've been with NBC News for 50 years, and people often say, how'd that happen? I said, no one else will take me. It wasn't quite the case, but that was my mindset. I went to work for a good company, I loved it, and I stayed. Now, students get out, and they change jobs 6 times, Jack, between the time they're 22 and they're 30 or 31 or 32 years of age.
Right.
So how nimble do they have to be in terms of their education to do all that? Thanks,
Tom. It's an incredibly volatile, uncertain, challenging environment for them. 6 times in roughly a dozen years. They don't achieve financial independence from their families now until age 31. Right. It's the highest in our lifetimes. And what we need to be able to prepare them for is the kind of flexibility, the kind of adaptability, the sense of an ability to wrestle with really hard problems that are unstructured and don't necessarily have precedents for trying to figure out how to work their way through them. And they've got to move around from different setting to different setting over the course of that first decade of their career in a way that is unprecedented.
And an institution like Georgetown, which is Jesuit and establishment, how cosmopolitan is your student body? How hard do you work at what you want to have to reflect this country and the many cultures that exist?
Sure. So we're a little less than Eduardo. We're only 140 countries represented in our student body, but because we were founded in the heart of our nation's capital in 1789, we've kind of grown up with this nation, and we've been a bit of a magnet for students from around the world. So we do have a very diverse student body. I think in the context of some of the conversation you were having with Michael a moment ago, what we're very proud of is somewhere in the range of about 15% or so of our student body would be first generation. And what we're really most proud of is we're getting all of them through. We've got about a 97% graduation rate for our first gen students at Georgetown. We're very proud of this. Now, we put a lot into it, and I sometimes feel like I should be arrested if we didn't have a number that high, because we put a lot of effort into this. What we hope we're able to do in a context like ours, because we are not scaled in the way in which the largest 4-year, the largest 2-year are structured. 166,000, 70,000. We're at the undergraduate level, we're 7,000. And what we hope we're able to do is to model some best practices for how we might be able to care for our young people and ensure that we're doing the work of formation that will ensure they're ready for that kind of environment you've described.
You're an elite institution. Would you like to have the best students that Dr. Padrón turns out at Miami Community College make the long commute?
You know, we go back more than 30 years in this work, and for more than 30 years, we've been taking some of his best students out of Miami-Dade, and we're honored to have that long-standing partnership.
But Dr. Padrón, is that the goal of your graduates, is to get to a place like Georgetown, or would they rather get to, let me get a 4-year degree from Florida State or from Florida Atlantic University and get a teaching degree of some kind and get something that is practical for me, that'll get me a job?
Well, my students have the same aspirations as any other student at any university in the country. Many of them want to go be engineers, many of them want to be architects, they want to be medical doctors, and we encourage them. If that's what they want to do, we support them. We, for the last 10 years, have been offering baccalaureates, and many of our students are engaged in programs that we try to provide them, the opportunity to get into jobs where there is high demand. In the present market, like data analytics and cybersecurity and supply chain and logistics. I mean, many programs that we have introduced into the curriculum for the jobs that are in high demand today. But these students, some of them stay with us, but many of them go universities all over the United States. Some of the best ones, like Georgetown, but they go through the West Coast and the Northeast and the Midwest. And the thing is that for us to be able to do that, these students have to work very hard, have to study very hard, because they don't have the means to really pay for their own education. And through the generosity of friendly universities all over the country, we're able to place them in places where they can really achieve. And what we're proud of is that once they go there, they achieve at the same level or even higher than some of the native students who were handpicked on the basis of high GPAs and high SATs. We're an open door institution, which means if you have a high school diploma, you have the right to earn, to go to college. It's also true that when those students come to us, many of them come unprepared for college. You look at the zip code of the high school that they attended, and you immediately know whether they're going to be ready for college or not. Our position is that we need to harness everyone's potential, especially in today's global economy. And that those students that are not well prepared, we spend a lot of time and a lot of resources preparing them for college so they can join the mainstream of academic life. A significant number of our graduates, and many of them who today occupy very important positions in government and industry, are students who started requiring a little push, a little support, so they could join the mainstream of academic life. But in America today, we cannot afford not to have those students succeed. We were having a discussion before when we were basically saying that very differently from the economy of as recent as 40, 50 years ago, where most Americans could go into factories and offices doing repetitive tasks with their hands. Most of those jobs are gone. And the fact of the matter is that today, more than 2/3 of all the new jobs being created in the United States today require post-secondary education. Those students that do not make it to college, that do not get some sort of post-secondary education, will be in the cycle of poverty for the rest of their life, most of them anyway. So making sure that a student has the opportunity to go to college, it's important. As I always say, opportunity, let me put it the other way. Talent is universal, but opportunity is not. And what we need to all work together is to make sure that the door of opportunity is open to all Americans, not only for the individuals, but for the nation. For America to continue to be a leader in the world, for us to be able to lead the global economy, I think it's very important that our people are prepared to be part of the innovation economy. And those skills today are very important at our institutions, that the students, when they graduate, you call it the master learner, we call them something else, but we're talking about the same thing. It's how they're able to navigate the economy and to be able to be successful, be able to support families, and have a better life.
Tom, if I could just pick up on Eduardo and put a number on something Michael said a moment ago to you when you were in an exchange with each other. Since the recession, our economy has created 11.6 million jobs since 2008. Only 80,000 went to high school graduates. Every other job went to individuals who had some form of post-secondary education. 8.8 million went to those with bachelor's degrees. So when you think about what's unfolded in our country over the course of roughly this last decade, the urgency to be able to address this question of opportunity that Eduardo points out, and the dynamics that Michael was referring to a little bit earlier regarding the changing elements of our economy, could not be more stark than what's unfolded in terms of
And Michael, what's the social consequences of that?
Well, it's the social consequences are that we're not aware. I come from a working class family. I have relatives who, I have siblings that didn't graduate from high school. Their children didn't graduate from high school. I've got other relatives who sent their kids to their high schools, and then they took classes, they got A's, and weren't admittable with their A's from their high school to the local public university, because there's so much confusion out there about what is learning and how to advance, and there's so much focus on elite outcomes and elite students, and there's so much focus on taking calculus and taking this and taking that, when in fact what we have, I think, is an overly rigid, structured, old industrial model of education that's got to be opened up to excite the individual learner, each individual learner. So the social consequences of this is that now, and we're seeing some of this in the present local and national politics, we've got anger and upsetness. What do you mean I don't have access to the American dream? What do you mean I worked hard my whole life? My family worked hard. I've been here for 10 generations, and then other people are showing up, and other people are doing this, and other people are having this happen, and so forth. And if you don't see the path for you or your family, or if college is priced in a way where it's too expensive for you to think about being able to go, or this, or this, or this, then you're going to be angry and you're going to be upset. And so right now we're in the phase where we need some solutions. We need some pathways, or we're going to see more of this. We're going to see more social, political, and cultural unrest as we shift to this new economy. You get people pushing back, saying, oh, well, it's all these Joe college types, like the three of us, just sitting around thinking everybody needs to go to college. It's not about everybody needing to go to college. It's about everybody needing to be prepared for the economy that we actually have and the economy that we will have. And we are underprepared, and we are underperforming. And we need to improve that.
the next decade, the underperformance, higher education will underperform the economy by 11 million jobs. The two-thirds of the jobs that Eduardo was referring to that will require post-secondary education, the math on that means over the next decade, we will underperform by 11 million jobs.
Yeah, Jack, you represent an elite institution, no question about it. Georgetown is anyone's survey of the best college in America. You're going to be there.
Even in basketball.
You're right.
Thank you. Thank you.
I went to Syracuse.
And
Thank you.
Michael, you were the provost at Columbia. That's
Right.
another elite institution.
Yes.
Or at least as the grandfather of a student there, they charge elite prices. I know that.
It is both expensive and elite. It's a Maserati package. That's correct.
Right.
But we are, just to be clear, we are one of 25 institutions in our country,
Georgetown,
private institutions that are need blind and meet full need. And what that means is we don't believe that your ability to pay is a relevant factor in our decision to admit you.
Right.
We don't look at that. Once you're admitted, we're committed to enabling you to come, and we will cover whatever your family can't cover. And that costs us about $100 million this year.
But my question is, are too many institutions, and Dr. Padrón and Michael Crow, I know how you run your institution, so I know that's not the case with you. Are too many other institutions trying too hard to be a Georgetown or a Yale or a Harvard or one of the elite institutions.
Well, let me take a stab at that. I think that what has happened is that we've become stupefied. We've become somewhat sort of intellectually lazy. And so rather than each college or university finding its own pathway and building excellence in a way like Georgetown has over its heritage, over its life, we don't need people copying the University of California at Berkeley or University of Michigan or Harvard or Columbia. We need colleges and universities that are set up around the country that are unique, that are working in new ways, that are engaging in new ways. We need to get past this notion about some of the silliness of these rankings and all kinds of other things and get about the business of looking at the products that these colleges and universities produce and measuring these schools for what they produce rather than who is admitted. And so that's a whole new psychology that everybody's sort of trapped in that box, I think.
And Tom, your instincts on this are exactly right, because 80% of higher education is public, 20% is private. But an interesting indicator right now of the instability of the private side is the current tuition discount rate. So you see that sticker price and you say, oh my gosh, how could anybody afford that? Well, no one is. The current discount rate right now in private higher education is 48 cents on the dollar, which means no one is paying more than half. Well, most aren't paying more than half on average. What that point points to is I think what you were trying to get at. Our private side, the model on the private side is broken. It can't be sustained at the levels that we are operating right now, and we've got to make some changes to it.
Dr. Padrón, how many of your students come and need a student loan or get out of there in just a couple of years with a higher burden of debt than they anticipated?
Well, first of all, we encourage our students not to take on loans because it's very important because most of the students are low income and our tuition is so low. I mean, you can go to Miami-Dade College for 1 year for about $3,200 the entire year. And we do it because we feel that it's the only way that many of our students can afford it. Every time we raise tuition $5 per credit, for many of our students, it's the difference between putting food on the table or going to school. So, we have a very small percentage of our students that actually take on loans, probably about 7 to 8% of them. And we provide a lot of financial aid. We're the largest recipient of Pell Grants in the country, as you can imagine. Pell Grants is the free grant that is given to students who are below the poverty level and so forth. And it's one thing that I think there is a deficit of understanding in the nation because those students are as anxious to achieve their higher education as any other students, but they go through a lot of difficulties. They, in my opinion, they are heroes and sheroes because the sacrifices they have to make in order to go to school are tremendous because they have family responsibilities. The other thing is that we need to understand more and more in America that we have significant numbers of people in their late 20s, in their 30s, their 40s, and even in their 50s, that in order to stay in the job market, in order to be able to succeed at work, they have to come and upgrade their skills or get new skills. At my college, I have, I think, over 3,000 students right now who have PhDs and master's degrees that are back in school taking courses and taking programs and boot camps and all kinds of other forms of learning in order to be able to sustain their job or change jobs or get a new job. I think we need to be open to all of that. Colleges should be, as Michael was saying, need to have the flexibility. They need to serve their own communities, and they have to be the most important equalizer that we have in society today. And that's what I guess we're all trying to do, right?
This crowd of people who represent the private sector and the relationship between the private sector and public institutions, it seems to me, is ever greater. What is it they should know about the needs that you have in terms of your relationship with the private sector, and so that they're not two separate ships passing in the night?
Well, I'll give several examples. So one, you got to stop thinking about institutions, at least like mine, Arizona State University, as if somehow we're the government. We're not the government. We don't operate as a bureaucracy. We don't follow the rules that sometimes folks in the private sector think that we do. And by the way, we've gotten $1.3 billion of partnership investments from a number of publicly traded companies on both the capital facility side and on the solar energy side, as well as a range of other things. So this is a common way that we've been working. We no longer operate as an agency. We probably never were an agency. We operate now as what we call a public enterprise. What we have difficulty finding, and what we need from the private sector in the form of partnership, is the ability to find ways to invest in partnership, where the profit-seeking entity can make a return on their investment and we can get the capital that we need. We're no longer getting capital from our state partner. We're getting some capital from municipal partners. We're getting some capital from some private sector partners. But I will say, and I won't name the banks, spent a lot of time a couple years ago here in New York talking to some big globally positioned banks to see how we might find a way for private capital to be invested in our institution with substantial return. We couldn't get anybody to understand what we were talking about. Now, maybe it was us, we're just too stupid to get it across, I'm not sure, but I don't think that was it. I think it was that the idea of somehow thinking about public universities as quasi-governmental entities that seek investment to be able to scale and invest and seek return, that's really what we're looking for. I will say that we have 140 partners in our technology platform for our online learning activities, all from the private sector. We've been able to develop those and advance those, and a number of those companies have done very well through their relationship with us. We just need to find more people to be able to work with us in a way where the private entity and our public enterprise entity can work together.
Jack, do some of your faculty members see the relationship between educational institutions of higher order like yours and the private sector as church and state? One should not get involved with the other one?
I think we're closer to that than the description Michael just provided for what he's trying to do at Arizona State. We've been around for 227 years, and I think we are a little bit firmer in drawing those boundaries.
Yep.
Yeah.
You've been through a very public exercise here recently with the history of Georgetown.
Yes.
And the sale of slaves to finance the institution at an early age. What prompted you to come up with the resolution of finding the descendants of those slaves and offering a form, I suppose, of resolution to them through the institution?
Yeah. So our university benefited from the sale of 272 enslaved children, women, and men on Jesuit plantations in Maryland in 1838. The Jesuits ran a set of agricultural institutions, and on these plantations they had slaves. With the sale in 1838, we were a beneficiary. We received a bit of the funds that were generated from that sale, and that did support the university in our first 40 years. Helped us get over a particular moment. In the context of what we were wrestling with as a nation over the course of these last 2 years, about a little over a year ago, I put in place a working group on slavery, memory, and reconciliation, because we were going through a moment on our campus. We were renovating a building, and the name on that building was the man responsible for that sale in 1838, a Jesuit priest. And we wanted to engage our whole community in that exercise of trying to figure out what did that moment mean for us, and in the context of what we are facing as a nation now, what were our responsibilities today in this moment to the legacy of slavery in our nation. Along the way, the journey kind of expanded, and in June I had an opportunity to visit in Spokane, Washington, and then a little later in June in New Orleans, Baton Rouge, and Maringouin, Louisiana, a group of about 50 or so descendants in different groups of families. Interesting thing about the Catholics, we keep unbelievably good records, so we were able to go and find a lot of folks. And once we realized the opportunity that we had to be able to connect them to our efforts at trying to understand this moment in our nation, it was an incredible opportunity for us. We're trying to understand, Tom, right now, how do we live with the enduring legacy of slavery, the fact that in this moment, we are still seeing the manifestations of that. A recent report we just did in Washington, Georgetown's School of Nursing and Health Studies. I will live 15 years longer than an African-American counterpart. The disparities, the health disparities that we face today, a young black child born today, a young black boy, 1 in 3 will be incarcerated. These are the enduring legacies of our history of slavery. We never ameliorated that original evil in 1864. And we're living with the consequences of that now. And I think in our case, one institution wrestling with one part of our history, we're trying to come to terms with how we can contribute in this moment to addressing that challenge.
Dr. Padrón, let me ask you a question along those very lines. You have all the colors of the rainbow in your school. You have North and South America and Asians as well. What has been the enduring lesson about these cultures coming together and having common objectives to get an education? And what can the rest of the country learn from your experience at Miami-Dade?
Well, we have worked very, very hard for many years to create a culture of success at the institution, where every student feels they have an equal opportunity to be successful regardless of where they come from, regardless of their economic condition. And that has taken a lot of effort and has been designed precisely to make sure that all students are able to work together. That today is so important. The work collaboration today has taken over our system because that's how most students are learning today. And it's wonderful to go on a campus, go into a classroom or go into a lab and see students from all kind of racial, ethnic backgrounds working together. And it's a result of very consistent effort by the faculty and the staff to have that kind of opportunity for people to feel a sense of belonging, a sense of ownership in the institution. You know, we're very large. We have a very low-income group of students. And yet to walk into the classrooms, you walk into the bathrooms, you walk into the campus, and you don't see any graffiti. And people come to visit the campus and say, how come you don't have graffiti and things like this? Because that's very common at other institutions. And the reason is because we have been able to instill such a sense of ownership on those students that they treat the institution as if it were their institution. There is that feeling that is so important. And that's what has led to us not having any racial issues whatsoever, any kind of situations that would have caused the disengagement of the students. And that is something that has worked for us, but it has taken a lot of work. And it's every day that we try to do that, to make sure the students feel represented. All the decisions that are made at the institution, all kinds of students are involved. And we have a very diverse faculty. It's not just the student body. Our faculty is as diverse as the student body. And that, providing the role models for the student, I think is the most important thing that we can do. Because if they see that that person that looks like them and speak with them was able to become a professor and was able to be successful, then there is a sense that they can too. And so many things that we have to do in order to provide the kind of environment that is conducive to very healthy relations among the students.
Yeah, I'll just add to what Eduardo said, and that is that right now I'm living probably the last couple months in the most significant moment of cognitive dissonance that I've ever experienced. I listen to the media or the press, and people running for office at all levels, and I hear this negative blather about, America is going down the tubes and all these terrible things that are happening. And then I have my job in one of the most diverse institutions imaginable. 45% of our freshman class of 12,000 are students of color. We have thousands of Muslim students, thousands of Jewish students, thousands of Mormon students, unbelievable diversity across every family you can possibly imagine, students from all over the world. And like Eduardo's situation, what you sense is unbelievable hope, unbelievable drive for the future, unbelievable creativity and energy. Even as recently as a week ago, I go home and tell my wife, Sybil, I say, listen, you and I can just retire because they don't need us anymore. These people are smarter than us. These people are driven more than us. These people have a view about the world in which they don't have some of the divisions that have existed in the past, and you can see it in the institution and how it works and how it solves its own problems. And so it has been unbelievable dissonance in my thinking to hear people describe. We sort of live a little bit in the future, all three of us, because of who we live with. Tens of thousands of millennials all living with us in the midst of us. We can literally see the future. And I can tell you definitively, my concerns about the future have to do with, can we make it through the present? Because I know what lies ahead with them.
That is a great note to understand. Let me just say that I couldn't agree with him more, and I also, on these occasions and on others, because of the good fortune I've had in my own career, I sometimes I worry that one of my college classmates will be in the audience, will stand up and say, "You don't understand, the moderator is a fraud." I came out of high school a real whiz kid and went to the University of Iowa and went completely off the rails. I had a double major, Pi Phis and Delta Gammas at that time. And I didn't flunk out, but I retreated to South Dakota where I continued my errant ways for a couple more years, then dropped out of school at one point in 1960 at the height of the John F. Kennedy election. And then on that election night, I watched, and I was already working as a journalist, even though I was not in college, because I had a certain skill set as a broadcaster and also as a writer, but I had really lost my way in terms of what education would mean for me. And that night I watched John Kennedy and Richard Nixon head to head. The election count went on until 8 o'clock the next morning. And I, at 9 o'clock, went to bed and thought, that's what I want to do with my life. I want to be a journalist and cover politics. And so in 2 months, I'm going back to the University of Iowa, where the library has accepted all of my papers and all of my correspondence and all of the stuff that I've done with my books. And my only concern is that I know several of my classmates are going to rush the field and say, no way, he is still who he is. Anyhow, I think we can all agree that with higher education in the hands of gentlemen like this and women presidents across the country, in fact, this country is in much better shape in terms of the future than it is given credit for. So I thank you all very much for paying attention to that. Thank you.
Great.